Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. The 1337. I'm joined this week by Ben Wilcox of ProArch. Welcome to the show.
Hi, CJ. Thanks for having me on. I'm super excited to be here.
So it is that time. It's the December series where we talk about what to predict in 2026. It might not even necessarily be a prediction, but more of like what you know is going to happen. And I like to start it off by saying we've had a few on so far this in December. We're now on the third episode. And the biggest prediction I've had thus far is for those that are taking security seriously, particularly in the ITSP space, insurance is recognizing their due diligence and rewarding that. So I'll give that as a place to start. I'd love to hear what you have for what you see happening in 2026. Maybe it's happening specifically with ProArch.
Yeah, sure. So ProArch's probably a little different than a lot of companies in the sense that we are a IT service integrator, but we are also very specialized in data analytics, creation of AI, and cybersecurity. So this past year for us has really been a great moment because that stuff is all very front and center when it comes to AI, right? You can't really do any of these pieces, right? You can't have, can't get to the AI state until you have a good data foundation. Your data quality has to be good there, and you want obviously a good secure foundation to operate this all within. And so as we've been putting this together and building these conversations with customers, one clear thing has come out, which is everyone is super interested in building agents and wanting to build them all over and every part of it, from processes that are well known to processes that they don't have a clue how to start doing or how to bring those data sources together. So I think we're going to start seeing a ton of stuff in 2026 about data platforms, agents, getting good data quality in place, and have that security, good posture around there as well.
So when you say chat agents, you're not necessarily meaning chat bots. This is not necessarily publicly facing to the end user of like, ask me a question and you just got a free car from the dealership.
No, not quite like that. But these are things that can have access to tools, things that can have access, tools can be different systems, different data types. But, they're designed to provide a very kind of specific outcome. And that could be, hey, help me with a proposal, or help me understand what these various pieces are that, I need to do my job and help start automating pieces of those.
Yeah.
So, it's heavily...
In essence, it's a non-human identity that you're interacting with that has privileges like a human would in your ecosystem.
100%. Yep. They're going to start operating with a human identity or, a machine
identity. Yeah, right.
So they need a human owner somewhere in there.
Right? Let's hope they have an owner. Like, otherwise Skynet is going to happen in our near future. So with that, I think this is kind of like Pandora's box, because I've had extensive conversations around how we use AI, or in fact, to some degree, it's kind of like AI is the new buzzword. It's not necessarily AI any more than it was 10, 15 years ago. It just now has an approachable or an accessible for the average user to get their hands on what maybe they should never touch. The question that comes to mind, this actually came up with a company that I'm in discussions with around a tool that they've built that just analyzes privacy policies using an AI prompt. And I was super excited, took it for a spin. There was a couple AI tools that I threw at it, and then I just threw at it websites that have a privacy policy on their website. And the information back was super interesting, maybe a little bit pause, made my heart palpitate a little bit when it comes back with a score that's not a 10. It comes back with a score of like a 4. and then you read through it and you're like, it gave you a 4 because even though they take security seriously, there's no evidence on how. So did some homework in this particular case, and I found lots of information to give me the confidence back. But why I bring this to this conversation is what was really interesting about it is I liken it to bowling. I might be able to bowl a strike in a 10 frame window. I'm not a professional bowler by any means. And I also learned the hard way that just because you can put bumpers in the gutters doesn't mean that when you throw the bowling ball down the lane that you'll hit any pins. But I would argue that the premise behind putting bumpers in the bowling in the gutters is to increase the probability of me scoring points through that 10 frame series. Is that what you are seeing when you start talking about AI? Like going out there and saying, I have access to ChatGPT or fill in the blank on the GPT tool, that seems like it has no real bearing on what most of us would have as outcomes that we desire in our businesses.
Sure. I agree. Like, I don't think a chat tool is an outcome necessarily. I mean, they're great assistants. They provide value. Like, I don't want to get rid of any of the 3 or 4 tools that I use. Like, that would make my life very hard. I had to go back to doing way more writing, and I already spend a lot of time in email. But if I think about like where AI is today, right? And I'm going to disagree a little bit on one thing you said. You
can disagree on everything I say.
No, just one piece, one little piece.
Okay.
So I think a lot of the AI stuff that's out there, right? Whether it's vision, machine learning, the core like AI stuff that we started seeing much more relevant 10 years ago that we all thought was going to be big revolutionary changes, right? Some of that stuff has, and it's trickled into products and services that we use, right? We wouldn't have XDR without machine learning today to bring all the signal correlations together. But what we lacked at that was an ability for it to interact on a human level, and the chat side of it, right, has certainly, the generative AI has certainly opened that up. And I do think it's surfaced new and better ways to interact and get some of those core AI pieces out of there. So I'll give you an example. We have a customer use case right now in manufacturing. We're pulling all this immense data out of the operating environment, doing some machine learning and understanding kind of what is a normal operating pattern. And when there's abnormal patterns that are detected in there, we've been able to trace them back over their history of their information and say, this is why that is, right? We've learned based on their outcomes. Now what we're doing as we move forward with that is we're getting into a real-time alerting so that they can know within a second that, hey, you have a predicted failure happening here, and then providing guided assistance through the generative AI agent side of it to let them know how they're going to have like an assistant, right? Before we could just say, hey, you got a problem, right? Now you got to go figure it out. But now we have a much easier mechanism to kind of put it all together and get to that, I'll say, AI assisted outcome, right? They're not going to go fix the problem on the machinery, but they can service a lot of stuff much, much quicker and interact with that operator in a much more intuitive, friendly manner, right?
That's like the expansion and contraction of what we would just say is automation that was built by a human versus AI that may be able to replicate that same automation with a few prompts. I'm starting to think that the world we live in, if we allow the end user to dictate where we go, we will jump off a cliff altogether.
We might. I mean, at the end, what we want to be doing is solving problems and making things easier. But I also do think that you got to have that human in the loop here. If we get to the point where we are letting machines make all the decisions, then we'll lose certainly some of our sharpness.
But I think you just hit it on the head. I don't think that any of us, at the end of the day, are looking for AI to make decisions on our behalf. We're looking for AI to help us influence our own decision because we don't have the bandwidth or capacity to consume the amount of information that it can summarize for us in a blink of an eye.
Sure. Yeah, if it knows what I would typically answer, great, answer it for me.
Yeah.
If there's something that there would be some variation of why it wouldn't, like, surface that back up.
Yeah. I have a friend of mine that just posted on LinkedIn about some humorous questions around evaluate my professional and personal identity, and then generate a character. Tell me what character from the Muppets, and then give my characteristics some presence in that Muppet. And of course, I shouldn't say of course, his ended up being, and he posted it. It was Kermit the Frog. So he gave us the prompts that he used, and I think he used ChatGPT. So I threw the same prompts into Copilot, and mine came back also with Kermit the Frog. Only mine didn't use any photos of me. It just came back with Kermit the Frog with a green bow tie and largely a naked frog. And I said, I can't post this. And so I responded with that to Copilot, and Copilot came back to me and said, well, I shouldn't have actually given you the picture that I did because that's a copyrighted Muppet. So I can't give you any more pictures that are based on actual Muppets. And so I said, okay, I don't know that I want to be affiliated with any individual Muppet. Take all of the Muppets and what you've gleaned from my profile through your collection on my OneDrive and whatever, and give me a new character. And so it like instantly said something about me being an owl that it made up a name for, as if it was an existing puppet in the world. And then it gave me all these accessories that are tied to things that I do on my day-to-day. And I'm like, when it was done, I'm like, this is creepy. I don't think my puppet would look like that. But at the same time, the elements that made up this puppet were things that are part of my day-to-day that anybody that spends time with me would be like, yep, that's CJ.
That's funny. Yeah, I do remember some of that stuff last year when people were doing a lot of the images around the holidays. People were giving themselves, I think, the gift
The G.I.
wrap.
Joes.
Yeah, the G.I. Joe stuff. Yeah, like you.
But I mean, I said that real quick. Like, I wanted to be G.I. Joe and not be like Barbie. But like, I don't know how I would be represented in like, Barbie world. I could have ended up in a case that's like, yeah, this one's the most valuable or the least valuable all at the same time.
Well, it's the divergent side of ChatGPT or Copilot, right? Those are all. I like the obscure thinking side of it sometimes, right? It gives you that outside view that's a little different, helps you get a different perspective, maybe balances some of your thoughts about what you're doing, and sometimes it's important to have someone that can provide some candid feedback, because oftentimes, I think that's something that is not done in our professional lives quite as much. So I like to use AI assistants in those types of things as well.
So leaning into that, something that comes to mind for me is the colon or the long tail or the dashes that you tend to associate with. Yeah, the M dash. And what comes to mind for me is that's our like identifier of like, well, this was generated with AI, so it obviously is not valuable, or it could be, and we're giving it less of a value, less credibility based on the fact that we know people are weighing in on because AI generated it. I believe that as we go into 2026, and I'd love your thoughts on this, I think the sophistication of what is today any of the GPT tools will become more human-esque, if you will, in the way in which they provide answers to our questions.
100%. That is a solid prediction. I am seeing it in Grammarly today. They have some new things over in like their web portal on Grammarly, which you select your type of tone that you want, and it is way better than I've ever seen any other output. So I think the other ones will all start picking that up very quickly.
Grammarly just shames me all the time of like, you did this many words and you are better than 8% of other people. I'm like, awesome. Like I should not write ever. So I want to.
I just blame it on the fact that Grammarly is running over other people's emails and stuff that are they send me, and I'm just replying.
So question. When we think about the tools that are and this is kind of futuristic as much as it is a reflection on the past. I've been using Grammarly for quite a while, but before Grammarly, I mean Grammarly in the sense of it being an AI tool, and it always has been an AI tool since its inception. It was not any better than it is today. I think it learns from what it's being fed, but I don't think it has a new algorithm that was built yesterday. I was started using a product. It's now going on 5 years. It's called White Smoke, right? No, Right Sonic. I think is. I'm totally butchering it, I'm sure. So it's a tool that you could give it input on things like, I need to write an essay. I need it to be read at a 5th grade, 8th grade, high school, college graduate level. These are the topics that I need included in the conversation, and it would build either a blog article. You could choose blog, you could choose essay, you could choose book prompts. So this is very much pre-AI in the context that we're using it today. And I remember I was still at the school district at the time, and I worked very closely with the STEM team. And I thought it'd be fun to write a story about a social emotional animal, like a service animal. And I wanted it to be that it was allowed to be in the classroom. And I picked an animal that was not, the norm. And I happened to pick an elephant. And so, like, a full-grown elephant. Like, I didn't think that it would be fun if it was a smaller midget elephant. Like, it had to be like full-grown, and like it had to be like this school, this building had to accommodate for this whoever the the animal was supposed to be with. And after it was all written, and the cool part was, as it's writing, it starts with like prompts, like, this is going to be your 5 paragraphs or the chapters, and you basically pick the ones that you don't like, and based on that it learns, like, okay, you didn't agree with, so now I'm learning that I need to adjust because whatever I have written is not adequate for the output that needs to happen when we're done. And so I think I probably spent, I'm going to say at the top high end, it was probably an hour of investment. I shared that with the person responsible for the STEM program at the middle school. And I said, I want to share this with you. I want you to know that the student that wrote this is very uncomfortable with being brought into the spotlight. I thought it was super cool. So I've removed all the information about the student, and I would like your feedback on it. And this individual came back to me and said, this is one of the best cases I've ever read for having a social, emotional support animal in a classroom ever. Who is the student? I said, that was written by a app. And it was like mind blowing. And we had a great conversation afterwards because it wrote a really good story, really before the chat GPTs, the chat 5s, the open AIs were really a thing, because it was structured in such a way that allowed for the human interaction. To your point, when human interaction comes into play at a level that has a visualization of like where you should participate, the output is far more phenomenal than anything that's going to happen in the let's talk to the chat bot, or let's talk to the prompt window that says, would you like me to do more? Would you like to do it this way? No, I want you to see what I want as the outcome and walk backwards with me.
Well, that's where we all need to really get much better at our prompting, is figuring out that outcome, right? Because if you can tailor your message, because it's going to be, especially like we've seen the stuff that's happened with the open AI models, it's gotten really, like, it's just kind of like leads you on. It started with like 4.0. It started getting into the point where it's really easy to talk to, and it's like, always wants to be helpful, and like it feeds you too much BS. Honestly, like it's not as direct, right? It's trying to
confabulate for you.
Happy. Yes,
right.
And it's getting a little better, but at the same side, I think that if we all get better at our outcomes, we can get much better use and expand it as a thinking tool, not a thinking replacement, because that's where people go wrong, is trying to use it as a tool that replaces them being able to think.
Well, let's bring it all back. Let's bring it back to where we started. So as you're looking at future predictions, one of the things that comes to mind for me is that if we look at almost any business that's paying attention to the world of cybersecurity, they probably are doing some sort of like security awareness training in their organization, whether it comes from Know Before or one of the other players that are out there. And what I find interesting today is I haven't heard anybody talk about what you just said is we have to do better at the way in which we approached using AI tools. So like it learns based on what we taught, or shouldn't say talk, like we're having a relationship with the tool, but like I liken it to like you're only as good as what you understand about how it can function, what it's capable of doing. And so if you understand the parameters and you know the variables, you can be very successful. Like just like what I was given, like had my friend not given us the prompts on LinkedIn of what we should put in, my response of just saying, hey, you should find out what Copilot or ChatGPT thinks about you as a Muppet would have been very different than use this prompt so that we're at least playing with the same sort of rules when we talk to any of the GPT tools. How are you seeing that play out in 2026?
Well, certainly, like employee education and training is a big piece. There is no widespread. If you think of AI as kind of maybe three sides, right? It's got a maturity level, and right, we're all starting. Most businesses are down here. They're not a frontier firm, and they're not using agents and everything, right? They're just using it as a personal assistant.
Right.
It's our responsibility in the technology realm to educate the users on how to get the most out of this, right? If people are just asking questions of like summarize this email, that's not really that useful. Like, yeah, I can read pretty fast.
And let's be honest, what kind of email are you getting where you need something to summarize it? Because if it's going below the fold of the page, were you going to read it anyway?
Likely no, right? And so many people don't read long emails anyways. So, but
if you gave me an attachment in an email, I am more likely to read what's in the attachment, despite all the security concerns of it being an attachment, than I am to read an email that's single space. And no matter how I structure on my screen your email, it goes below the fold. I don't want to read it.
100%. I mean,
it's boring.
I concur on that front. So I think if we can get to a point where we are educating our user base, and there's a lot of initiatives like because we do a lot of Copilot types of adoption work.
Sure.
Like and then there's probably whole sets of new careers that are going to be launched next year as people that help onboard and bring this forward, because it doesn't matter where people are coming from. This is a continuous cycle, right? It's no different than your security awareness training. It has to happen constantly. You have to have processes to handle existing employees that are on different curves of maturity. New employees that are coming in that maybe have never had exposure to any of these tools before, right? And they're not cheap, but there is good ROI. Like some of that ROI is measurable on there, and with the right usage, people can get great use.
So last question before we close it out, with regards to the sort of this AI phenomenon, I'm not even sure how to ask this question, which I should have wrote it down when I was thinking of it. But one of the things that we're all seeing right now is, to your point, how the end user is wanting AI to solve problems for them. And recently, I don't know if you've seen in the news, students graduating, and they were talking about how students that normally graduate from Stanford or any of the prestigious schools would say, like, if you got a good degree that's in a field that's high in demand, there's a job for you out there, and it's probably pretty easy to get. And then the second part of that, in that same story, I happened to have this conversation with someone this afternoon. They were talking about how their child just recently graduated from a prestigious school and no job. So they'd be like, well, all right, I'll go after my master's degree. And the master's degree ended up using how to do structured data and AI and some other things. And before they were even done with school, they had multiple job offers from some of the biggest players. But going back to the article that was based on graduates from Stanford about how they can't get jobs because of AI, it reminded me of, and I'll try not to age myself, but it reminded me of when I graduated, what you could, back in the late 90s, you would graduate with either a CS degree or an MIS degree.
Yep.
And whatever job you did land was largely tied to systems admin, web admin, but they were kind of all like in the same, you just got shoved into a corner and no one really gave you a whole lot of attention. You were important to something because you could call Microsoft and use words that Microsoft understood, but the rest of the organization did not. Are we messing up the future of the human portion of this with like, oh, well, AI is replacing or AI can do that? I think it goes back to the beginning of this conversation when you said the human element. If there's not a human in the equation, we're setting ourselves up for fail. How do you see this playing out in 2026?
That's a loaded question in there. So there's new roles, I think.
You can answer it gently. Like you don't have to be like, well, I'm drawing a line in the sand. This is what I think is going to happen.
Well, I think in 2026, yes, there is probably still more disruption. Like you saw, there was last week or the week before, the consulting firms are thinking about kind of restructuring because the consultant role may be going away. Right? You have a knowledgeable advisor in front of you, with immense knowledge, right, that you can query and get the right stuff from. How do you get that back? I don't know, but there's definitely roles.
And if you paid it by the hour, it's way cheaper and way faster.
Right. Yes, the output, it might even have higher quality. We don't know.
Fair point.
But like, I think that there's definitely, for a while I thought that prompt engineering role might kind of disappear. I think that that's going to explode. That is continuing to be an area where I think to get the most out of these models.
Bumper builders.
Yep, bumper builders. Those folks need.
That's not fair. That's not fair. That sounds really, really like you're like, no, I'm not talking to you. You're just a bumper builder in our organization.
No, but like someone that can build that curated knowledge, I would think of it as like some organizations that have an immense amount of knowledge internally, right? They have an in-house librarian or someone there, right, that can help get the right stuff because they just know the right ways to get that information out. That role is going to be big, especially as people start to kind of move to the point of trying to automate some processes. I don't think that there's any. There's going to be growth in like process types of areas as well, where you can document and figure out processes.
Sure.
Like if you have that skill and you can out that process and be able to get to a point where you can automate it, right? There's a lot of opportunity in that space. I also think for change management, that is an incredible hard thing to do, and not enough people out there to do it. Right? And it requires
change management's not hard. Recognizing that you need to document because change management is part of the success of your business, that's the part that seemingly is difficult.
Yep.
It's recognizing the importance of it to everybody, not just your own business, but those that you do business with.
That's part of that starting point, right? To get to that point, these processes, you got to know what you're doing and what's changing in your environment. And a lot of the stuff's up here, walks out with people, leaves their head and never to be seen again. And the business can function, but they don't know why it doesn't.
I would argue that the biggest solve, if you think about things like the impact on the human population, the Industrial Revolution, all those things that have happened up until this point, it's not AI per se. It's inside of AI, the ability to have things get captured, to your point, documentation, the ability to have AI summarize a meeting, to have AI give me actionable intelligence around what were the takeaways from a meeting that I was not paying attention in, are actually, I think, changing the outcome and productivity of more or less all of the human workforce that's out there. Because if you're using AI to tell you things like, these were the 5 takeaways from your hour meeting that you had 4 of today, like those are real, like you actually feel like, okay, that meeting, that was such a waste of time. And then you look at the summary from AI and you're like, oh, I have things I have to do. Like, oops, I should have paid closer attention. I'm not sure I have enough time to get those things done before the due date.
That happens quite regularly. I'm like, how did I end up with so much action here? I need more.
Right. My to-do list is way longer than it should be. I need more
Right.
resources.
Well, 100%. So like these are all like things that are coming, right? And I think data
Yeah.
quality, people that are looking at being able to tie these systems together. I mean, like understanding data flows is going
Yeah.
to be super important in the future because this stuff's all living in different spots, right? You have unstructured data, structured data, you have different SaaS apps that are all connected. AI is going to bring those things together, and you're going to end up with the system that's talking to all these things. And how do you know what could be impacted if something bad
Yeah.
happens with one of these agents, right? You got
Before
to
I ask, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no. Before something really bad occurs in that space, what like, you got to be able to recognize how this stuff occurs so that you can
Sure.
respond in the right manner.
So before I ask the last question, I feel like in the space that we're in, there's a lot of opportunity to do better with AI. So with that being said, for those of you out there listening, if you're in the conversations around AI, the biggest question I would have you ask your clients is, what is the goal they have as an outcome of using AI, if they aren't already prepared for that. With that being said, Ben, last question. We'll close this out. What's the book that you are currently reading that you would like to share with our audience?
Well, I just finished it up. I've had the book for about 6 months. My problem is sometimes I start multiple books at the same time because I'm not sure what I really want to go to, and then I start gravitating towards one. But it took me, I've had it for about 6 months. I came across it at RSA conference last year. I'd met the guy who wrote it, Freaky Clown. It's called How I Rob Banks. It's about his life of being a pen tester in financial institutions and all the
Wow.
crazy stuff that happens in there. So it's a lot of good stories. It's an easy read. I don't know why I started it and couldn't put it down, but honestly, as soon as I picked it back up about a week ago, went right through. So
It's
highly.
scary how true stories are more dangerous sometimes than fiction. I recently finished up Darkwire, which is the story around essentially the Anam and the BlackBerry phone being modified to be the underworld's tool for communicating without the authorities knowing, only to find out the company that they were buying their phones from was the authorities. Uh, yeah, I love it. For those of you listening, this has been an episode of MSP 1337. Thanks and have a great week.